Okay, are we back? Are we back? Jesus Lord. I'm sorry. Okay, hold on. Are we here? I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. The thing closed. Okay, are we back? Yeah, whoops. Sorry. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, please like it back. This is a crisis alert. I did not. Yes, we're back. I'm sorry. That was actually my fault. I was fiddling with something and I accidentally pressed the X button to my streaming program, so it just totally cut us out. I apologize. That's actually never happened, surprisingly. I'm surprised it hasn't happened more. But anyway, sorry. Sorry, everyone. Sorry. We're gonna come back here to the live stream. Okay. Yes, we're back. Sorry. Sorry. We are back. So, yes, for those of you who are jumping into the new live stream, we had some minor technical errors, but now we're back. We're fine. We are going to be, yes, starting a new fresh thing of this. And let me go back to the old stream. Thank you, Susan, for telling me. Let me go back to the old one and let people know that there's a new stream. That was just really difficult, but whatever. Luckily, that was mostly loppy load or, load time. But still, is there still like a chat going on? I don't have access to any more chat. Yeah, the chat's over from my end. I can't access any more chats. I'm going to be just deleting that bit because all I've done is explain the intro and so this is the new one, yes, that I just like randomly started because the old one, well, I didn't even mean to have an old one. It just dropped out. So yeah, share the new stream. I apologize. So let's let's start again. Hello, my name is Jan Erickson. This is my YouTube channel called Monday Monad, in which I talk about hyperianism and self-actualization. We originally did this spiel, but we're doing it again because we had some technical errors. So anyways, tonight we are going to be watching this very interesting discussion about, does science explain everything about reality, and is there a place for religion in a rational future? So we have amazing moderators with us tonight. We have Susan Mitchell, we have Rowan James, and we have Christina Larson, all who are members of the Hyperion Source, which I actually guest live streamed with just last Wednesday. So if you want to check out the live stream that I joined them with, please check that out. We talked about can you still rationally understand that you're a god even though you feel really shitty. So please, Hyperion Source members, please promote and pitch your YouTube channel and let the people know who you are. Our moderators are here to keep a nice, healthy environment in our chat room and keep us focused on our discussion, and most of all, keep me focused and in line. And so, yes, I want to get started with tonight's discussion, especially now that we've had to restart with the introductions. Luckily, it's only 7:05, so we're kind of on time, but perhaps maybe 10 or 15 minutes more late than I would like to be. Anyways, hello, all of you beautiful monads. Thank you for coming. Hello, Andromedus. Hello, Renaissance Fairy. Hello, Cassidy. Hello, I know Cassie is here, and I mentioned that Cassie is an old friend of mine. And they're not actually old. She's not old, as in, like, we went to school together and everything. So Cassie's going to be visiting me soon, and I'm very excited because I have not had a vacation in an extremely long time. Like, a fun vacation, not like I need time off to mentally catch up with myself and the world. So, let's see. Hello, Tyler. Hello, Zero. Hello, Athon? Yes, Athon. Athon? I don't know. Let's see. Hello, hello, hello. Yes, if anybody still has the old chat up, please contact them. Perhaps everybody is lost right now. I feel bad about that. But the replay will still be available if you got kicked out and you don't know how to get back in. Let's just take a deep breath. And start over. And, oh yes, to tip, go to please tip at mondaymonad.live. I absolutely need the support. Your contribution means everything. And we can keep making awesome stuff, amazing things, and having amazing discussions. And where is my rag? Jesus Christ. Alright. I lost my nose blowing apparatus. Anyways. New sparkly water. I like this one. This one is like grapefruit. I like grapefruit sparkling waters best. Yeah, sorry everyone for the Athen, or is it Athon? Athen or Athon? Athen or Athon? That's fair to ask. Ethan. Ethan, I'm sorry for over pronouncing your name or like over inflecting your name. Thank you for coming. Ethan. 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 Yeah, let's wait just a couple of minutes for everybody to come back in. I feel bad. I really did not mean to. It always socks me so hard in the nuts when that happens. It hasn't happened for a while. Even though I just said previously it's never happened. It's actually happened a couple of times, but like I've been doing Monday Monad for 2 years. Like almost over 2 years now. So the last time this kind of stuff happens, it's just like, I don't even remember. So, who is eager to get on with this discussion? We are going to be talking about the future of religion in a rational world. There is a distinct place and a role for the future of religion. It's just very specific. So, anyways. I want to be able to not have the music, but at the same time, I need to, like, kind of do something to cover this up. Let's see. No, that's okay, though. Let's stop the music. Stop the music. And let's get on with the discussion. I don't have my notebook and pen like I had last time. That's okay. I think we are going to do very well as long as I can untangle myself from my own headphone cords. Jesus. So, we are going to start the video now. And we are going to use certain talking points from said videos to discuss important foundational Hyperion information right now. Before we start the video, though, please like the video, or like this live stream, share the live stream, and if anybody's gotten lost from the live stream, help them come back by sharing it to them too. I'm really excited to get into this. It's really hard to like keep going over the intro right now, so I think I've done enough. Let's just get into it. Without further ado,
Welcome to Fantasy and the Void. I'm Wes Alwan, co-host of the Partially Examined Life Philosophy podcast. In a survey of academic philosophers, 85% identified as atheists.
So actually, let me find the original description of the video because I think it's important to first like probably introduce like what's happening here. So let me find the original description. Let me find the original description of what's happening. So the details of this discussion for these people, and we're going to pretend to sit in as the Hyperion voice. Within this, it's will science ever replace religion? And it says in a survey of academic philosophers, 85% identify as atheists. In Europe, established religion has been in decline for a century. Even in the States, attendance is falling. Yet globally, religion remains a potent force, and predictions of its demise have not materialized. Side note, I beg to differ because hyperianism is here to bring the end. Anyways, yet globally remains a potent force, and predictions of its demise have not materialized. Amongst those who have abandoned established religion, new forms of spirituality such as mindfulness and yoga are on the rise, which which makes me laugh because I just see like a bunch of people who they're like, well, Jesus wasn't very fun, so I'm just gonna get some yoga pants. Anyways, does religion in all its many forms provide a psychological support for humans that makes it essential, without which there is only the void? And they really specify like the void, which is really funny because as a Hyperion, I'm like, well, yes, that's actually very factual. Without religion and all this hobbledy-gobbledy, there literally is the void. But the void is a very certain thing in Hyperionism, which is a very special kind of nothing. It's not a depressing nothing, which is like the atheistic, materialistic science nothing, where it's like there's literally nothing. It's a special kind of nothing where there's still a little something, but it's a something that's nothing. If that's very confusing to you, just stick with us. We are going to get into that more. So here we have scientist, author, and parapsychology researcher Rupert Sheldrake. We have Hegelian psychoanalyst Slavoj Zizek. Slavos. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Slavoj Zizek. And professor of history at University of Madison, Wisconsin, Jennifer Ratner Rosenhagen, discuss whether the persistence of religion is an extended but ultimately temporary phenomenon. And Wes Alwyn hosts. So, I'm not trying to like watch this video and just remain quiet and just play it for you all and just so that you can like see how it's like. I'm going to be sitting in this like pretending that I'm the Hyperion at the table, and I have my moderators here to bring up things that maybe I'm missing or stuff like that, and most of all answering your questions. So if you have questions about how this relates to Hyperionism, or if you're like, wait a minute, what does Hyperionism think about this? Please ask. Like, our moderators are here to help you understand. So, I hope you understand all of that. Except for I feel like I need to pee, which I always hate to do on live stream. I really do. Because I always go right before I start, but then like it always happens again. Okay. Let me pee and we'll be back. Hold on. Okay. And we're back. And the lights in my face. And and yes, everybody get your munchies, get your crunchies, get your snacks. I don't have any. I just have sparkling water. That's fine. And my microphone keeps going out. Anyways. Let's dance. Put on your red shoes and dance the blues. Sorry. Oh, who has what? Oh, Christina has walnuts. There we go. I had banana nut bread, and the nuts were walnuts, and the lady that made them with like full half walnuts. It was amazing. I ate it in secret in my underwear in my kitchen late Tuesday night. That's how I feel like a god. Anyways. Sorry, hold on. I have to cough. That was like down the wrong tubey type of thing. Anyways, so.
Europe, established religion has been in decline for a century. Even in the States, attendance is falling. Yet globally, religion remains a potent force, and predictions of its demise have not materialized. Among those who have abandoned established religion, new forms of spirituality, such as mindfulness and yoga, are on the rise. Does religion, in all of its many forms, provide a psychological support for humans that makes it essential, without which there is only the void? Is there something about being that is ineffable and which can never be eradicated? Or is the persistence of religion an extended but ultimately temporary phenomenon that will be replaced by the success of science? Today, we are joined by Rupert Sheldrake, who is a scientist, author, and parapsychology researcher, best known for his 2012 book, The Science Delusion, and controversial viral TED Talk he gave, which was later banned by the organization. Slavoj Žižek is a Hegelian psychoanalyst and arguably the leading celebrity philosopher of our times. Idiosyncratic and fiercely polemical, Slavoj is currently...
We got a Hegelian in the house, although his Hegelianism does apply to like certain things, not necessarily the ontology of the reality of life. We'll see though. Let me see.
Serving as international director of the Birkbeck Institute for the Humanities. And Jennifer Ratner Rosenhagen is professor of history at the University of Madison.
Dude, I dig her look so much. Like, this is an incredible aesthetic.
Wisconsin.
I love that hair.
Known for her work on Nietzsche and the transatlantic flow of intellectual movements. Her books include American Nietzsche and The Ideas That Made America, which was first published in 2019.
We got a Nietzschean, we got a Hegelian.
We'll start with a question for which each speaker has 3 minutes to present their thoughts before we move into the body of the debate. That question is the persistence of religion a temporary phenomenon that will eventually be replaced by science? Okay, let's begin with Rupert.
Well, what makes religions different from mechanistic materialism, which is the usual belief system underlying atheism? There are many kinds of atheism, but the common or garden atheists, the kind of Richard Dawkins type atheists, are usually mechanistic materialists. What makes all religions different is the belief that there are forms of consciousness that are higher than or more inclusive than human consciousness, that our consciousness is not the only kind there is. I mean, in most
already this guy is like spitting. Seriously, honestly, like, to say that something that religion does kind of get right only in like a very specific aspect is that there's something above and beyond the human consciousness, which is something that is above and beyond a simple product of the brain. Correlation does not imply causation. A simple matter of the fact, you cannot assign so much abstract thought to the brain alone. So there really is a consciousness that is above being human. And that hyperianism can give a thumbs up. That sounds really fucking good. We like that. Yes, there is consciousness that is above. And I feel like, what is going on with my microphone? Hold on, I've got it like going through two different things going on right now. What's happening? What's happening? Okay, I think I fixed it. So anyway, I fixed it. Anyways, the microphone problem. But anyway, what was I saying? Yes, there is a consciousness that is above and beyond what we conceptualize as a human consciousness, which is the atheistic sort of scientific materialistic approach, which is the idea that consciousness is a product of the brain, the physical brain. The physical brain, as useful as it is, and as needed as it is, and as amazing and complex as it is not as complex and abstract as a infinite mind, which is like an infinite singularity of energy, of just like awesomeness and amazingness. Anyways, continuing.
Materialists would admit that some animals are conscious too, but otherwise they see the entire universe as made up of unconscious matter. And then consciousness somehow emerges in a very mysterious way inside material brains when they get big enough. And the light bulb of consciousness goes on, but consciousness doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't give us free will. It's nothing but the...
I mean, I don't know what kind of consciousness he's talking about, but we definitely have free will.
The activity of our brains. That's the standard mechanistic materialist view. And of course, when we die, then the brain decays and all consciousness comes to an end. That worldview leads to the idea that God, gods, spirits, angels, etc. are nothing but fantasies inside human minds and therefore inside human brains. But this is just an assumption about the nature of consciousness, and in fact, mechanistic materialism is extremely bad at explaining consciousness. The very existence of consciousness...
Oh, I love that. I love that there's like a lot of acceptance around the idea that religion kind of explains consciousness wrong, in the idea that there's angels, there's demons, there's God, and this and that, and it's like there's too much of that. And then he goes on to say like, well, but atheists and materialistic science goes on to say something that's pretty much just the same. What the Thank you, Rowan. I don't know why we're doing that, but okay. Sorry, that was very distracting. Anyways, let's continue.
There's an embarrassment, which is why it's called the hard problem in the philosophy of mind. So it's not as if mechanistic materialism has a brilliant theory of consciousness that explains it all. It doesn't have a theory at all.
Yes! It doesn't have a theory at all.
To say it's nothing but brain activity. On the other hand, when scientists actually look at the effects of religious and spiritual practices rather than approaching it in an ideological spirit, then it turns out that religious and spiritual practices have measurable effects. There have now been thousands of studies of the effects of spiritual and religious practices published in peer-reviewed journals. Many of them are summarized in this the Handbook of Religion and Health in 2 thick volumes. And basically, the result of this research shows that those who have spiritual and religious practices tend to be happier, healthier, and live longer than those that don't.
I need to hear that again. The Handbook of Religion and Health? Will one of the moderators, just write down this book title? 'Cause I'm kind of curious. I would love to, read this book and do, a critique or, a review or something. The Handbook of Religion and Health.
In 2 thick volumes. And basically, the result of this research shows that those who have spiritual and religious practices tend to be happier, healthier, and live longer than those that don't.
So people with religious practices, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to repeat, but I want to hear
of the effects of spiritual and religious practices published in peer-reviewed journals. Many of them are summarized in this, the Handbook of Religion and Health, in 2 thick volumes. And basically, the result of this research shows that those who have spiritual and religious practices tend to be happier, healthier, and live longer.
Those who have religious practices. Can we all appreciate and recognize the very specific word of practices? Not beliefs. Not ideologies. But practices. That's something I can very much agree with. Is having a religious practice. But as a Hyperion, when I see religion, where it fits in a rational future, religion must evolve and must become a tool of psychological practice. Emphasis on practice, something that you just kind of do over and over again with certain meaning for yourself, certain abstract meaning. Roberta Singer says religion is unhealthy currently. Correct. Yes, religion is unhealthy currently because it is utilized as a belief. Beliefs in themselves are not necessarily bad. It depends on what the belief is, but when it comes to belief in what you are and what your purpose is, religion as a belief is bad. But I like what this guy is saying and how he's specifying religious practice. So I'm actually kind of interested in reading that book. I want to read that book and I want to see what it says exactly and what the research says. Rowan says we don't need to suppress or repress our need for mythos. It just needs to be guided rationally. Letterbuck and shatter zones. Yes, that's very true. So when we use the word mythos, it refers to the sort of spiritual aesthetic side of hyperianism. Hyperianism is always based in rationality. However, it very much condones a practice, a psychological practice that perhaps may be unconventional. Like you could light a candle and look at it and contemplate about certain things, and that is representative of of what you're going through psychologically, but it's a practice. You could do that every day. You could focus on your intentions. It's no different than I love the way Morg explains it because you really can't find any better way to say it than it's like blowing out the candles on a birthday cake. We do that every year with a certain intention and we make a wish and this, that, and other. And then suddenly it's like, oh, we can't dabble in spirituality because it's weird and new age. But no, spiritual practice in general is done all the time.
longer than those that don't. In other words, it presumably means that those who don't have religious and spiritual practices are unhappier, unhealthier, and live shorter than those that do. And what you would expect on this basis in a secular society where many people have lost touch with traditional religions is that they, on the whole, get depressed. And of course, depression is the endemic problem in industrial secular societies. Millions and millions of people are on antidepressants. So presumably this...
I don't know. Okay. Just because millions and millions of people are on antidepressants doesn't mean they're on antidepressants because they are lacking spiritual practice. So, I would be careful where we are treading with that, sir.
Lack of religious and spiritual practice is bad for health, and that's why I think militant atheism should come with a health warning, because insofar as it puts people off their traditional religion and religious practices and leaves very little in their stead except a belief in science, then it's likely to harm people. Spiritual practices are not going away. On the contrary, they're increasing in their...
I don't know if they're increasing, but I do agree with the fact that they're not going to go away.
Reach and in the number of people taking them up. So for me, the question is not about the value of spiritual practices. The question is whether spiritual practices will reconnect with religious traditions from which they originally came, whether religions will adopt more spiritual practices, because primarily it's about practice, not about belief. And
oh, he said it! He said it! I didn't even I wasn't even trying to predict where his ideology is. I don't even know much about Mr. Sheldrake, but he totally said that this is about practice and not belief, and that's something in hyperianism that fits in hyperianism. Mythos is not about belief; it's about practice. But if at the core of that practice is a belief, it's no good. It's not going to work for you. But if at the center of that practice is reasonable, rational psychology, it's very healthy for you. Very healthy for you. With the exception that you stay totally anchored to the rational part of it.
Or whether we'll have large numbers of people who are spiritual but not religious, whose practices float in a kind of secular void, unrooted in religious traditions.
Slavoj, is the persistence of religion a temporary phenomenon that will eventually be replaced by science?
No, I actually liked what he had to say. I really liked what he had to say. I don't know what the rest of his ideology is, so I can't totally promote him as somebody that I think you should listen to every word. But when it comes to that topic, what he had to say was very credible. It was very fair on a rational level. When it comes to religious practice, not belief, but practice, it is proven to be healthier for somebody to have that than not. Slavoj, my boy, says Rowan. Yeah, we got a Hegelian in the house, so I'm very... Yeah, okay, so the thing about Zizek is you have to, instead of leaning into how he pronounces things, you kind of just have to relax your ears and your cognitive whole and just allow the words to come in. So the moment I find I'm not getting what he's saying, I hear what he's saying. So you just gotta relax and open your ear pussies. I'm sorry for saying that, but it really makes sense. Just relax and let it in.
I have here a rather paradoxical opinion. No, it's not a temporary position. I think it's although I consider myself an atheist, I think there is something in the structure of human life, human mind, the way we relate to reality and so on, that, as to refer to your title, that opens up, implies the void, which then is filled in by religion. But not to get lost in this, I will just like to quickly describe a couple of points which complicate this simple opposition. First, as you, Rupert, nicely deployed, yes, I would go even a step further. The usual idea of materialism is small, somewhere in empty space, there are just small bits of matter, and they somehow chaotically mix, and everything comes out of that. My type of material.
So he's talking about like how the previous Jesus Christ, Mr. Sheldrake was saying about how materialistic science doesn't really like pony up to any sort of religious practice, or not necessarily that, more so like concepts of consciousness that are above and beyond just something that's a product of the brain. And so Slavoj is coming in here and saying, yes, I kind of agree with that, in the sense that materialistic science tries to look at reality in material ways, as in like there's matter, and there's this bit of matter, and there's a smaller bit of matter, and there's an even smaller bit of matter, and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller bits of matter, and we're trying to go smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and trying to see what reality is made of. And materialistic science has no answer. None. They don't know what reality is made of, because they can't see it. And here's where hyperianism comes in and says, hey, those parts that you cannot see, you can only see through the language of mathematics, because you're literally looking at invisible energy. You cannot see with your eyeballs or any machine the invisible source that makes up reality. Does that make sense? The only way we can understand it is through sheer mathematics. We can understand the flow, the functioning, the way this invisible source makes up material, makes up matter in this reality. But materialistic science cannot see down to the bits. So we're going to see what Slavoj really sees in the materialistic science, because he says he is an atheist, which is really interesting, to be an atheistic Hegelian. I don't know. Does that seem weird? I don't know. That just seems just a little weird. I mean, I guess you can. I don't know.
Materialism would have been, I called it.
Let me rewind.
I will just like to quickly describe a couple of points which complicate this simple opposition. First, as you, Rupert, nicely deployed, yes, I would go even a step further. The usual idea of materialism is small, somewhere in empty space, there are just small bits of matter, and they somehow chaotically mix, and everything comes out of that. My type of materialism would have been, I called it that, materialism without matter. I take the lesson of, as far as I'm able to understand them, of quantum physics and so on, and I claim we should not get fixed on a certain figure of matter, this mechanistic idea, you know, like little billiard balls, whatever, encountering each other. Reality can be totally abstract. It can be immaterial waves, whatever we call it. What makes it atheist for?
Oh, he's saying it can be reality can be immaterial waves, whatever we call it. So he's going on to say now, what makes it materialistic for me is...
For me, and this is the crucial point, is that it's not run by an overreaching intelligence or whatever, that it's basically blind. A blind process, not mechanist. It's a blind process, but for me, so-called reality, we can debate what it is, as I often develop, open, ontologically non-constituted. That's why I totally oppose those readings of quantum physics which see a kind of hidden idealism in it, you know. The role of observation.
I have to let that soak in a bit. Rowan, help! I have to let this soak in a bit. What? I have to hear that, what he just said again. He's saying it's not, he agree, you can describe it as immaterial waves, however, and then he goes on to, somebody help me. Help me! I understood everything up to that point.
I called it that. Materialism without matter. I take the lesson of, as far as I'm able to understand them, of quantum physics and so on. And I claim we should not get fixed on a certain figure of matter, this mechanistic idea, you know, like little billiard balls, whatever, encountering each other. Reality can be totally abstract. It can be immaterial waves, whatever we call it. What makes it atheist for me, and this is the crucial point, is that it's not run by an overreaching intelligence or
It's not ran by an overarching intelligence.
whatever, that it's basically blind. A blind.
It's basically bland. That's the part that confuses me. It's materialistic because it's not ran by some overarching intelligence. It's based... Oh! Planned? Bland? Planned?
Process, not
It's blind? Blank? We have so many suggestions here. Let's back it up. Boop, boop.
by religion, but not to get lost in this, I will just like to quickly describe a couple of points which complicate this simple opposition. First, as you, Rupert, nicely deployed, yes, I would go even a step further. The usual idea of materialism is small, somewhere in empty space, there are just small bits of matter, and they somehow chaotically mix, and everything comes out of that. My type of materialism would have been, I called it that, materialism without matter. I take the lesson of, as far as I'm able to understand them, of quantum physics and so on, and I claim we should not get fixed.
I'm sorry, how can you take in materialism without matter? That's what materialism is about.
On a certain figure of matter, this mechanistic idea, you know, like little billiard balls, whatever, encountering each other. Reality can be totally abstract. It can be immaterial waves, whatever we call it. What makes it atheist for me, and this is the crucial point, is that it's not run by an overreaching intelligence or whatever, that it's basically blind. A blind process, not mechanist. It's a blind process, but for me, so-called reality, we can debate what it is, as I often develop, open, ontologically non-constituted. That's why I totally oppose those readings of quantum physics which see a kind of hidden idealism in it, you know.
Okay, I get what he's saying. The reason he's seeing it as atheistic is because of the point where he's recognizing that there's no, like, higher intelligence of it all. You see what I'm saying? There's no, like, creative, there's no external creator source, as we say. There's no external creator process to this, but he's saying that it's sort of blind in a way, which is very confusing to me because ontologically, as a Hyperion, I mean, in Hyperianism, it's not necessarily blind. As in, like, I don't know if he means blind as in, like, there's not any sort of, like, purpose to it in the future. Yes, Rowan, he said waves. Anyways, let's continue.
The role of observation, this means that reality is somehow constituted through our gaze. No, Niels Bohr regime was to the end not a religious guy. But again, this idea of, I think, changes enough. This idea of reality as ontologically incompleted, with gaps even in itself, incomplete universe. And at the same time, very important, the growing, exploding gap between what science presents us as reality and our ordinary, everyday experience of reality. Look at classic Greek thought, Aristotle. He basically constructs an ontology out of our ordinary daily experience of reality. You know, heavy objects fall down, up the sky, and so on. But already with Galileo, this image becomes counterintuitive, then Einstein, then quantum physics. Yes, it is. I will wrap up. So that's the first thing. So this is the problem that I have even with some people like Hawking, whose thesis is that that the time of philosophy is over. Science is now replacing it. Not only religion, but even philosophy. Science is taking it over. How? It's true. It's very interesting observation that in the last decades we were trained to even look for the solution of one's metaphysical question in science. If you are today interested, is our world finite or infinite? You look into quantum cosmology, not to metaphysics. If you want to know we have a free will or not, you ask cognitive scientists, and so on and so on. But I think, okay, I will explain it later to wrap up. I think that there is a dimension of reflexive thinking which remains a domain of philosophy.
Oh, so I'm getting to the point where he's like, there's a domain of thinking that will always remain philosophy. I think he's getting into there's always a domain that's going to be abstract. And so it's not like he's really confirming that there's a mathematical reality per se right now. Hold on. All right. So it's not like he's confirming like an actual like a mathematical reality. I mean, he gets that it's there, but he's also saying like we can't go the other way either. So let's continue.
Or a philosopher here, and which for structural reasons cannot be covered up by science. And point two, on this I would especially like to insist, we should be very careful about what do we mean by belief. Today we have not only beliefs which we publicly profess but secretly don't take seriously, we also have things that we publicly mock but we act as if we believe in them. Mm-hmm. To conclude, one line, literally, don't be mad at me, with my favorite, you must know it, most of you, joke idea attributed to Niels Bohr. You know, a friend of him saw at the entrance to his house a horseshoe, superstitious item preventing evil spirits to enter house. And the friend asked him, okay, but you are an atheist scientist, why do you have that about the entrance to your house. Bohr answered, I know, I don't believe in it. I'm a scientist. But I was told it works even if you don't believe in it. That's our attitude today. I stop. I'm very sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Slavoj. Jennifer, now your
They're
turn.
like,
Is the
what?
persistence of religion a temporary phenomenon that will eventually be replaced by science?
So I'm not a philosopher, but
Like what?
I spend enough time with them to know that they have a pesky habit of asking you to define your terms before they're willing to engage, usually.
Well,
Although we have
that's
two
important.
philosophers who are
I'm
willing
sorry,
to.
but she's like, I'm not a philosopher, but I noticed they have the pesky like thing where they ask you to define what you mean before they engage in any conversation, and that's fair. That's fair. Words, singular words, tend to be very heavily loaded. That's why when hyperianism talks about the word God, we bring that conversation a big, giant, fat disclaimer. The disclaimer of here's what we actually mean by God. And among other things, like here's what we actually mean by source. Here's what we actually mean by mythos. Here's what we actually mean by this, that, and the other. So, I mean, I get what she's saying, but it's like, how can you not have a conversation without first defining what it is that you're actually talking about? If you're having a conversation about God, it's like, well, what kind of God? A chocolate chip God? A mint God? A strawberry swirl God? Like, what kind of God are we talking about?
Have a conversation. I mention this because there are two terms here, science and religion, which actually are pretty imprecise. But here, I don't have to be a philosopher. I can be a historian and say that they're also historically contingent. So the terms that I think we're going to be using today, although maybe my colleagues will surprise me, are terms that actually really have a vintage from the 19th century. And in the long span of human history, that means that they're pretty much, these terms are in their infancy. I mention that just because it's important to know what we're talking about, where there's overlap, where there's porosity between what we're calling science, what we're calling religion. It may do well to find other terms to have this conversation. So for example, maybe idealism or rationalism versus empiricism might get us a little closer to whatever the epistemological or moral issues are at stake here. Okay, but these are the terms I'm given, and I will be a good guest and work with them. So will science replace religion? Again, I'm a historian here, and we're not really good at prognosticating, but if I look at history as any indicator, the answer is no. And that is because if you look at, I think there are two ways to come at this. One is from a scientific perspective and another one a religious perspective. So let's take a scientific perspective. If you look at the long history of science, whether it's materialism, empiricism, naturalism, whatever ism, take your pick, it's often historically been used to actually credentialize what we might call religious practices or religious belief. That is to say, there's a long and vibrant history of showing how science has been used to show the efficacy of religion in one form or another. If we take just the last 100 years, you can look at psychology, you can look at neuroscience, you can look at physics and see examples of this sort of dialectic and credentializing. I'll just drop a few names here that might be interesting for the audience and hopefully for.
I'm sorry, but physics and neuroscience, as brilliant as physics and neuroscience is, it doesn't really say much about the nature of reality, which I think people would reframe religion if they knew what reality really was. And going back to what's his face? Oh God. Sorry, I'm having a slight blank right now. Anyways, our first guest. Our first person who was saying that, where was I yes, Sheldrake, thank you. Who was saying, now I lost my thought. What was I saying? I'll find my spot.
perspective.
Don't worry.
If you look at the long history of science, whether it's materialism, empiricism, naturalism, whatever ism, take your pick, it's often historically been used to actually credentialize what we might call religious practices or religious belief. That is to say, there's a long and vibrant history of showing how science has been used to
No, okay, so I mean, the point he was saying that, like, religious practice will never disappear. And I kind of have to agree. Uh, Religious practice is not going anywhere. It's going to eventually be redefined when it comes at me as the Hyperion representative. Religion is. Science and physics don't really explain much, but I do understand the idea of religious practice, not belief, but religious practice, religion being redefined, reframed as a psychological practice, that's going to remain in the future. That's not going to go away. There's benefit to that. What's not a benefit is the aspect of it that's the belief, where it explains what reality is. Now, unfortunately, as great and physics and all this other stuff is, this materialistic science is, that it does bring very important information to us. It's a very important way of understanding reality. Certainly, it's not complete garbage, but it's not the full picture. So the full picture is the invisible mathematical source to all reality, the one which materialistic science cannot see. And in knowing what we truly are, if everybody who religiously practices knew and understood what they really are, which is an eternal mathematical being, they would redefine, reframe their practices much differently. I don't think they should go away. These religious practices, they just need to evolve.
show the efficacy of religion in one form or another. If we take just the last 100 years, you can look at psychology, you can look at neuroscience, neuroscience, you can look at physics and see examples of this sort of dialectic and credentializing. I'll just drop a few names here that might be interesting for the audience and hopefully familiar to some. The first name that comes to mind is William James, the famous American pragmatist, the first one of the main figures who brings psychology to America. And James was, as he called himself, a radical empiricist. So he wanted to use science, but he wanted to use it as a way to, as he put it, widen the field for the search of God. That is to say, what James was seeking was a kind of rapprochement between these warring ways of knowing, between science and religion. And James is very important then in showing the efficacy of what he called religious experience. Or you could even look at the 1970s. And I know Slavoj made a comment about not liking the sort of wooey idealism behind some quantum physics. But that's just an example where some of the early figures in quantum physics or at least in the 70s, who helped to really bring it some prominence, were themselves deeply engaged in and influenced by Eastern mysticism.
All right, I can say this again because I've got it down. Like, it's so true. There is nothing more psychedelic and aesthetically pleasing and amazing than the 1970s when it comes to occultism and, like, being in a cult and, like, ancient mystic knowledge and knowledge of the universe. The 1970s is the best. Absolutely best. I mean, the best music, the best, like, style, everything, and just, I mean, we got the funk era, like, everything was just top notch out of the 70s when it came to understanding, like, the fundamental, like, reality, or the fundamental, like, knowledge of the universe. Everything we do now is boring and just like they did it with style. It wasn't just like, hey, we're going to understand like what the universe actually is. They did it with style. So absolutely they were a lot more like open-minded to that stuff, and it was a lot more of a practice. So I don't think it's too far-fetched to say like that was the best time. Yeah, baby.
mysticism. And so, in a sense, their engagement with Eastern mysticism gave them a new set of eyes to see the possibilities in quantum physics. And in turn, they used quantum physics to show the efficacy of some of these Eastern philosophies. Let me, if I may, just tuck in one more thing. We can then come at it from, if you will, a religious perspective. Again, take a historical perspective. And what you see is that religion evolves. Religion is very, very adaptable. And by that, I mean all of the world's religions. You can throw new facts at it, you can throw science, you can throw whatever. And religious traditions have a positive genius for either somehow working with, enlisting these new ideas and incorporating them into their worldview, or just dodging them. And so, and this is again an insight that
I mean,
James
you're pretty
had
much dodging them. I don't know.
from his perspective on religion.
It's so weird to listen to everybody like tiptoe around like the obvious and not actually be aware of it, which is like the complete and total just ideology and just like the idealistic and like abstract like component to like reality, but it's still being rational at the same time. Like I'm just kind of surprised. I'm a little surprised when some of these people who are like, well, I'm not trying to take a jab at them and saying that they're undereducated, because what they're saying is extremely intelligent. It's just like I'm just kind of surprised how it's like, yes, we recognize that there's something that should be here, but we don't quite know what it is.
He said, ultimately, human beings are pretty conservative. They have a stock of beliefs. And when a new idea comes, they try to get that new information to jive with their belief. And when it doesn't jive,
She said jive! I'm telling you, late 60s, early 70s. That was where it's at. Y'all want to know revolutionary music? Listen to the fucking Isley Brothers, right? Fight the powers that be. Anyways, continuing on.
the conservative temperament, as he calls it, our passional nature wins out. And so in that regard, religion, there's a persistence with religion, partly by way also of accommodation, evolution, and transvaluation of what comes its way. So that is simply to say, though, I would never trust a historian to prognosticate. I think history tells us that we're not likely to see anytime soon the usurping of one, the authority of one for the other.
Thank you, Jennifer. Our first theme is in 2002, Stephen Hawking's book, The Theory of Everything, was published, the title suggesting that the scientific method is so powerful that it has omniscient potential.
The scientific method is so powerful that it has omniscient potential? What?
First question of the debate is, can science, in principle, describe everything? Slavoj will start with...
No. Can science, in principle, describe everything? I'm sorry, I'm going to have to jump in here with the Hyperion as the Hyperion representative. No. No, it can't. It can't. It cannot. Unless it's, like, specifically an ontological science, it cannot describe that. Only mathematics can describe that. It's a literal, like, language.
you, and then this is a free for all. People can jump in, have a free exchange.
Again, we have to be very specific. Science, we mean the modern science.
So he's saying, let's be specific about the kind of science we're talking about. By science, we mean modern science.
First, Galileo and so on, physics, that model, and then
Galileo, physics model.
we know, sorry, what happened in the 20th century. But then let's go to the end. What interests me are those mixed phenomena, like, did you hear about neurotheology?
Neurotheology. Have you heard about neurotheology? No, I haven't. Is that a thing? Hold on. Neurotheology. It's a book. The multidisciplinary field of scholarship that seeks to understand the relationship between the human brain and religion. Oh. I also want to read that with squinting eyes. And a cup of tea with my pinky raised. So, will somebody remind me? Will somebody send to me in messages to read that too? I'm actually kind of interested in that. Let me star that. Star, bookmark, save. I'm just curious.
The idea, which I think will ultimately fail to artificially, through simple intervention into our brain, generate religious experiences.
There's a part, he's talking about parts of our brain that could potentially generate religious experiences. Hyperion creators have talked about this before. This is a very interesting area. I don't want to go too, into this, but there is a part of us, just to sum it all up, there's a sort of portion of the human brain which seems to kind of naturally elicit hallucinations and of such, in which we sort of interpret religiously in such a way where we attribute it to external forces or beings or things that are separate from us. This is not the case. There's something very interesting going on here, but it is not an actual divine intervention from a different being, as much as that would be nice.
Of course, this is a limited procedure, but it nonetheless interests me what remains after this of traditional religion. Second thing, precisely this plasticity, adaptability of religious experiences, how it can adapt, incorporate, nutrient, and so on, is for me rather a sign of its insufficiency. Sorry, but all religions cannot be true if you take them seriously.
He's saying all of religion cannot be true if you take it seriously. So which one is right?
And doesn't this adaptability rather not signal in the sense that there is some basic propensity towards religious experience? I admit this. It's very difficult to be a consequent atheist. I would even go, that was the point of my Niels Bohr example, to say that most people, even atheists, at some practical level, they are religious. Even Stalinism, not in the sense that Stalin was like God and so on. But you know, when Stalinists speak about objective necessity, responsibility in the view of the laws of history and so on, they presuppose a figure of the big other where, if I may put it so, the ultimate meaning of everything we do will be finally recognized. So you presuppose a kind of divine perspective, the meaning, of everything.
Robert Leonard. So what? So everyone was keeping you from being Catholic. I'm not. Is that serious or is that like a joke? Anyways, I have to pee. You're gonna watch this, and perhaps I will rewind. Hold on.
Will be settled. But that's my paradoxical relationship towards religion, although I'm an atheist. You know where, for me, religion is at its most interesting? When precisely it tries to adapt to science, but leads to apparently crazy results. Most of you know this story, which is, again, absolutely my favorite one, about how a friend of Darwin, some British bishop, whatever, who was literal fundamentalist Christian believer, had a problem. He saw that Darwin is onto something serious. But the Bible tells him, he was literal here, that our universe was created a little bit over 4,000 years ago. So how to combine this with implications of Darwinism? I hope you know what his solution was. The best theory of ideology that I know. His solution was that, of course, God cannot lie. He did create our world 4,000 and something years ago, but he directly created fossils, like creating reality in a
logical poet
movie studio to give us a wrong impression of openness. I think that is the best definition of ideology, this false openness, creating your own past. Can science...
I'm sorry, but okay, so we got Robert Leonard saying, Rowan, thank you for answering. One, we can discuss them one at a time. And two, our Lord said there would be wheat beside weeds, wolves among the sheep. Okay. I mean, like, we don't want to be rude completely, but we've definitely contemplated these things before. Okay, saying, but push comes to shove, the church will always preach the truth and the gates of hell will not prevail? Okay, this is... I'm sorry, Robert, this is silliness, like, absolute silliness. Like, we're trying to have, like, a rational discussion, but we're not trying to, like, pitch religion here, because we're not religious, so I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to go. We don't do that. Like, this is absolutely silliness. Like, 100%. So, we're going to continue on with the actual discussion that we're having, not the discussion about Catholicism.
In principle, describe everything. I think this is the standard, not religious, but even modern European transcendental philosophical argument. It cannot, because it lacks this philosophical reflexivity, which shows you the conditions of your own scientific activity. I'm not a Habermasian, but here Habermas made a good point where he said, yes, we can provide a perfect naturalist description of a human being. But we are doing this as members of scientific community, following a certain procedure, a certain understanding of being. I agree with your point about mechanist materialism, and this was not simply the result of studying reality. It can be clearly shown that this mechanist aspect was an a priori that this materialist of the 18th century brought into reality. So this type of reflection, which shows how scientific reasoning itself, it may try to explain everything, but in some sense it's unable to fully account for itself. Something, a certain scientific approach to reality and so on, must already be here. And you always already presuppose it. This circularity, I think, escapes science itself, at least in the sense of modern science.
The limitations of materialism are fairly clear when it comes to...
I'm not quite sure what his point... Like, I feel like I have to read his points. God bless his soul. No joke intended. Or yes, joke intended, sorry. Thank you, Kai. Yeah, I don't know where Robert is, but we don't do that here. And that's kind of the point, though. It's like, well, why don't you just look into Catholicism? Well, why don't you look into this? Well, why don't you look into that? Because each and every individual religion has a much different aspect of it. And as I'm saying before, the point that I agree with religion having a place in the future is the actual rational practice of it. When this person came in, sorry, I already forgot their name. Robert, when Robert came in and was like starting to give their reasons as to why we should look into Catholicism, all they did was recite certain religious passages, which doesn't offer an actual explanation for anything. All it is poetic. It's just like literally just writing something or saying something artistic or expressive. It doesn't actually offer any expression. And in this part where I say that religion has a part in the future, in a in rational society, it's the psychological aspect. It's the practice, not the belief. The practice has a very large psychological component to it. It actually means something rationally. You cannot just recite biblical passages. You cannot just describe something artistically and it means something factual and psychological. And you can't do that. You just can't. And that's why I just kind of don't put up with it here in the chat room when somebody just spouts off religious passages, because it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't offer anything. It offers nothing. It contributes nothing to the conversation. Anyways, continuing.
Consciousness. But it's also run into great problems in cosmology and physics. As most people know, many cosmologists now think we live in a multiverse with billions, trillions of other unobserved universes, not a shred of evidence for them. 95% of reality is dark matter and dark energy. We haven't got a clue what they are. They've been invented to shore up the equations of physics so the cosmology works, but by titrating in as much dark matter as is convenient to make the equations balance. And superstring and M theory with 10 and 11 dimensions are untestable. They predict the existence of at least 10 to the 500 other realities or universes. So physics is a mess, and many people feel that theoretical physics is stuck. I think it's stuck. But meanwhile, the problem of consciousness and consciousness studies is the most glaring limitation of materialist science. And I think that's what's so interesting, is that in response to the hard problem, many philosophers of mind, even if they're atheists and materialists, are now becoming panpsychists. There's been a panpsychist turn in philosophy, saying there's some kind of consciousness even in atoms and molecules. And if you take
Panpsychist. No, this guy is spitting. Honestly, this guy's kind of more closer to hyperianism than anybody else. Sorry, hold on. Hold on, I have to cough. No, Rupert's been spitting this whole fucking episode. This whole topic. He's actually been saying like really intelligent, like not that everybody else has been contributing greatly, but like this makes the most sense because he's keeping the topic focused on the psychological aspect of it, and mostly like highlighting how science isn't really helpful at explaining much. And no, I kind of want to rewind this a little bit. Like I love what he's saying so much. Like
shore up the equations of physics so the cosmology works, but by titrating in as much dark matter as is convenient to make the equations balance. And superstring and M theory with 10 and 11 dimensions are untestable. They predict the existence of at least 10 to the 500 other realities or universes. So physics is a mess, and many people feel that theoretical physics is stuck. I think it.
Physics is a mess, honey. Honeys, physics is a mess. It does not know what the hell is up or down or sideways or what. Everybody grab some snacks and drinks because we are locking in. We are locking into Rupert. Let's go.
Stuck. But meanwhile, the problem of consciousness and consciousness studies is the most glaring limitation of materialist science. And I think that's what's so interesting, is that in response to the hard problem, many philosophers of mind, even if they're atheists and materialists, are now becoming panpsychists. There's been a
They're becoming panpsychists. I love that. Let's turn down the red. Jesus. Because there's really like so much. Sorry, I'm trying to find a way to form this because I feel like I've said it plenty of times. There's only so many ways you can try to break down reality and assign it to something that's the opposite of what we're trying to prove we are. It's interesting to me that there's so much correlation between, it doesn't matter if it's religion or ideology or whatever, like whatever it is, it's this part of us that longingly wavers or just unwaveringly goes to the our minds unwaveringly go to this place where we can't help but know that we are something that isn't just a hallucination, a product of the brain, and we don't just die. And there are some people who convince themselves of that, but as was mentioned by Rupert in the beginning of this, that there's immense studies towards people that show that people who have some sort of spiritual practice tend to live longer, richer lives than those who don't, who are very cold-hearted atheistic. I'd be interested, obviously, Rowan, you can't, like, share your whole life story, but I'd be kind of interested in hearing your sort of personal feelings about, or anybody growing up atheist, your personal feelings about how that felt about yourself on an existential level, like how, like, because I can see where there's the benefits of spiritual practices even on a psychological level. But it's interesting to me because I've never in any sort of way been atheist. So I can't imagine going throughout my life with any sort of like actual moment of like, oh, there's nothing. Just like kind of appreciate the moment and then it's gone. Let's, Rowan says, I'd have to join your live on that. Let's put a bookmark in that, because I kind of, that would be a very interesting, because, I'm always, like, reached out to as, like, a Hyperion with religious, like, growing up in a religious household. Like, I'm always reached out to that experience, but, like, rarely, it's interesting, rarely do we reach out to our Hyperions who grew up atheistic. Like, rarely do we do that. Like, what's that like? That's a very interesting approach. Okay.
Psychist turn in philosophy, saying there's some kind of consciousness even in atoms and molecules. And if you take that seriously, as I do myself, then you have to ask, well, what about the consciousness of the sun? I recently published a paper in the Journal of Consciousness Studies called Is the Sun Conscious? I answer yes.
Is the sun conscious? Oh, I gotta look that up. Is the sun conscious? Is the sun conscious? Oh. We might be looking into this in the future, my friends. This is very interesting. Okay. I actually know nothing about Rupert Sheldrake, so this is really interesting. I mean, it's like you can't, like, there's little bits here and there speckled in where it's like, no, that's not Hyperion. No, that's not Hyperion. But for the most part, when it comes to, like, conceptualizing the future for humanity, not necessarily his explanations on what reality is in itself, that's a little shaky, but when it comes to what needs to be done with humanity and humanity's consciousness, like I really kind of agree with where he's going with what should be done in a sense, or what is to be in the future of humanity.
Probably. And what about the consciousness of the galaxy and the universe? And if we get to the consciousness of the universe, then how does that differ from pantheism? And if we get to pantheism, how's that very different from various forms of panentheisms? We get into a realm of theological discussion.
I got to admit, when it comes to these more specific isms, I'm not like 100% on like par with this stuff. It's not, I would definitely be interested in exploring this to the point where I do understand it, but I must admit, when you start splitting into like very specific isms, you lose me a little bit. But I'm also like the feeling type. I'm not a thinking type, I'm a feeling type. That doesn't mean I don't have the capacity to be a thinking type. It just means like, you're losing me when you split too many hairs. And until I understand very specific components, like, I get lost and then I move on so that I can get the bigger picture. And sometimes that's okay.
So I feel that materialist science is certainly very, very limited, and its limitations are obvious. I think science is likely to expand to become much more panpsychist, and
Let me just look up panpsychist just so like I'm refreshed on what that means. Panpsychist. Panpsychism. Panpsychism is the view that all things have a mind, or a mind-like quality. Hmm. The word itself is coined by the Italian philosopher Patrizzi. Francesco Patrizzi in the 16th century, and derives from the two Greek words pan, all, and psyche, soul or mind. All mind. So it's the view that all things, so like an Abraxian perspective, so all things have a mind. That's where you lose me. And then it says, or a mind-like quality, which kind of draws me back. But both of those things, all things have a mind. All all things in the holos, if I'm to talk as a Hyperians, all things in reality, all things in the holos don't necessarily have a mind, but it is made of mind. If that makes sense. I'm like 99.99% sure that's a very good explanation. And to say like all things have a mind-like quality, well, yeah, that's kind of a sentence that better supports the everything is made of mind. But not all things have a mind. Like my soda doesn't have a mind. This loppy lump behind me doesn't have a mind. Everything's made of mind. like us as monads are a mind, like everything's made of made of mind, made of mental material, but not what's a thing. Here we go into the definition of what is thing, what is a thing, what do we define as a thing here? Very interesting. Okay.
I think there are other principles in science which are likely to be expanded, including our view of the mind, and allowing it to escape from the confines of the brain. So science can expand a lot further than it has done now. It's held back by materialist dogma. But even so, I think it will still be incomplete because it will still presuppose ourselves, our minds, our own abilities to understand the universe, which it won't explain because the mind that's doing the understanding can't very easily explain itself since it's presupposed. So I think there will always be limitations, but I think right now it's more limited than it needs to be.
What did he just say?
And if we get to pantheism, how's that very different from various forms of panentheisms? We get into a realm of theological discussion. So I feel that materialist science is certainly very, very limited, and its limitations are obvious.
It is.
I think science is likely to expand to become much more panpsychist, and I think there are other principles in science which are likely to be expanded, including our view of the mind, and allowing it to escape from the confines of the brain.
Yes.
So science can expand a lot further than it has done now. It's held back by materialist dogma. But even
it is held back. Science is held back by materialistic dogma. The materialistic dogma says that something suddenly sprouted out of nothing. When hyperianism says something sprouted out of nothing, what we mean by nothing is a very special kind of nothing. It is a source. It is a singularity.
so, I think it will still be incomplete because it will still presuppose ourselves, our minds, our own abilities to understand the universe, which it won't explain because the mind that's doing the understanding can't very easily explain itself since it's presupposed.
I'm sorry, what does presuppose mean? Presuppose. I'm not sure about the sentence, but it just kind of the what's throwing me off is he's saying like the mind cannot explain itself, which we are a mind and we can explain ourselves. So I don't know if I'm like looking at that the wrong way, if I'm like picking that out in a weird way where it's like not meant to be picked out, but that's just where my brain is going. Let's continue anyways.
So I think there will always be limitations, but I think right now it's more limited than it needs to be.
So I'll hop in here in response to the question whether science in principle could describe everything, and maybe just add this. I guess, well, one is that it hasn't so far. Most reputable science.
Oh, I love that. She's not even like a science or like here on behalf of science or like here on behalf of philosophy. She's just straight up here like, well, historically, like what we've seen so far is it just hasn't.
Scientists that I'm aware of, I mean, this is the Dawkins quote actually sort of takes me by surprise. Don't think that it can. Have no expectation that in any time soon it will be able to. But I think the maybe more pressing, or for me more interesting question is, would we even want it to? And here I must say I have...
No, that's a weird question. At least for me personally, as somebody who is more driven by curiosity, even if that curiosity comes with lots of fear, yes, I would want to. Yes, of course I would want to. No. I mean, now I know. Now I know as a Hyperion, but that's such an odd, like peppering in.
Interesting question is, would we even want it to?
Would we even want science to explain it? Well,
And here I must say I have a little anecdote from Richard Rorty, who's an American philosopher, who has this wonderful little scenario that he has in a piece that he wrote in the mid 80s called Science is Solidarity. And he's being very cheeky and I think quite funny. And here he's talking about philosophers, but we could say the same thing about scientists. So let me just do this Rortian move. He invites us to imagine a scenario where the greatest scientists, all over the world are convened together.
I'm sorry. As a participant in this holos through an avatar, I think I'm full of scenarios. But let's just have it.
To come up with the truth about the entirety of the world. Yeah, they're going to describe everything, and they have their many maybe days long conversation, and then they all agree. They can agree that values are objective, that science is rational, that truth corresponds to reality, and lo and behold.
What is happening right now? I like her aesthetic, and I'm trying to be respectful, but I'm being taken away on this crazy scenario. What?
We just add this. I guess, well, one is that it hasn't so far. Most reputable scientists that I'm aware of, I mean, this is the Dawkins quote actually sort of takes me by surprise, don't think that it can, have no expectation that in any time soon it will be able to. But I think the maybe more pressing, or for me more interesting question is, would we even want it to?
That is not a more pressing question. I'm sorry. That is not a more pressing question. Of course I'm sorry. I'm not trying. Never, ever here on Monday Monad Friday Night Live do we want to deliberately be mean. But when things don't make sense, we have to say, what the fuck are you saying? What the fuck you doing? I'm looking at you like, what the fuck
and
you doing?
here I must say I have a little anecdote from Richard Rorty,
we don't need
who's an American philosopher, who has this
we
wonderful little scenario that he has in a piece that he wrote in the mid 80s called Science is Solidarity.
Especially from
and
the
he's
80s.
being very cheeky and I think quite funny. And here he's talking about philosophers, but we could say the same thing about scientists. So let me just do this Rortian move. He invites us to imagine a scenario where the greatest scientists, all over the world are.
This is okay. So this is a scenario. Imagine from the 80s. So now this is 1980s aesthetic with the greatest scientists from all the world with their freaking flock of seagulls hair. And they're awesome 80s doctor sciencey trench coats with the big ass goggles. I'm thinking of what, Geniuses with Val Kilmer, early Val Kilmer now. Oh my god, I have to watch that movie immediately. That's what it's called, right? So the movie is called Real Genius. Oh my god. It is the best. Okay, so side note. We're going to just take a quick side note just to take a little break from this lady before we go back to that. But just so you know. Hold on. If you want a great, very super cheesy 1980s movie about the about the difference between being having a Dionysus part of yourself and more an Apollonian part of yourself, absolutely watch this movie immediately after this live if you can find it. It's called Real Genius, and it's got early Val Kilmer in it, but it's such a great movie. Okay? You have to watch it. It's one of my favorites. It's so fantastic. It's how I imagine a really cheesy 1980s Hyperion Academy. So just watch it after the live stream. Find it, rent it, do whatever you can. Just do it. Anyways, back to this lady and her 1980s antidote scenario that we're being strung along with now. Everybody strap yourselves in. We got a scenario, girls. In we go. I feel like we're like on the crazy boat ride in Willy Wonka right now. And the knowing must be knowing. And the going is the going. And the scenario is the antidote.
Convene together to come up with the truth about the entirety of the world. Yeah, they're going to describe everything, and they have their many maybe days long conversation, and then they all agree. They can agree that values are objective, that science is rational, that truth corresponds to reality, and lo and behold, they can describe the whole universe for us, and they're just going to put it together and hand it out, pass it out in due course. Rorty asked the question: Would people say, yay, we've been saved? The scientists are going to answer everything for us, or would we recoil in horror, not only at their hubris, but also at the utter absurdity of that claim? And Rorty proposes, or supposes, as do I, that I would hope that many that those of us sitting around the Zoom room or listening in would be like the latter. So why would that even be something desirable? Because again, science is something that human beings do. So what you're really saying is you're going to hand it over to a group of human beings to then adjudicate what the absolute truths of our world are. And I think that would be boring at least, and terrifying at worst. So that's my.
I think she's afraid of irrational truth, and not in like a condescending way. I think like she just like she's trying to look at this at a historical perspective first of all, and so it's just really, I don't know, it's weird. I want to move on.
My thought on that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that was that was odd.
I'm going to move us
She did her
on
best.
to
She did her best.
The next theme of the debate. The next theme is why.
So we just only have 15 minutes left of this video. I want to get through it.
Why does religion remain so popular? So Nietzsche declared the death of God 140
Okay, so why is religion so popular?
years ago.
As a Hyperion, I gotta say because I don't know, because there hasn't really been any open discussion about redefining religion, and there's no like bridge, and people genuinely are still wired for religion. I'm sorry, I think a lot of people in today's society as a human race, I think their brains are still broken, and by broken I don't mean like they're like messed up forever. I mean like literally their brains are not developed enough to conceptualize reality without some sort of mysticism, without some sort of religion, this, that, and the other. They literally cannot do it. Like there's no brain parts there to help them do that. Some of us have those parts. Some of us can stretch that way. It's a very small percentage of humanity, but that's the reason why religion is still fairly prevalent. And also our older generation, the generation that's in power, still perpetuates that kind of stuff too, and utilizes it as a tool of manipulation.
The majority of the world's population seems not to have gotten the memo. Jennifer, we will start with you again. Why does religion remain so...
Did he just laugh? Did he just laugh like, Jennifer, I'll start with you again? Jennifer, we'll start with you again? I gotta hear that. I'm sorry. That was funny.
The next theme of the debate. The next theme is why does religion remain so popular? So Nietzsche declared the death of God 140 years ago. The majority of the world's population seems not to have gotten the memo. Jennifer, we will...
They did not get the memo.
Start with you again.
Just one more time. This is so funny. The way he says, he's like, Jennifer, we'll start with you again.
Debate. The next theme is, why does religion remain so popular? So Nietzsche declared the death of God 140 years ago. The majority of the world's population seems not to have gotten the memo. Jennifer, we will start with you again. Why does religion remain so popular today?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Nietzsche, because he's always on my mind. He's never far away from my internal conversation.
Okay, sorry.
So the memo that Nietzsche gave was, of course, the madman parable. And for those in the audience who don't know this, it's in 1882, the Gay Science, Nietzsche introduces his famous madman parable, where the madman comes running into the town square and he says, God is dead, God is dead. We have killed him, you and I. We have.
God is dead, girls. God is dead. We've killed him. We've sent him to his grave. We shoved a jawbreaker in his mouth, threw him in the trunk, and rolled him down the ravine.
His blood stains on our clothes. We have his blood stains on our hands. And he's greeted with
Good night, Cassie.
indifference, snickering. And he realizes that he's come too soon. Yeah? His time is not yet
He came too soon. What?
come. So when Nietzsche introduces the God is dead, his point in that, and it stays, it's something that develops even in his philosophy as he moves forward, is that people will continue to pray to a God they don't believe in, because they will cling to the moral certainties that religion provides, the existential consolations. So science is not going to just give a final blow to religion. So anyways, if I may just follow up.
No, science won't give the final blow to religion. It will be reason itself. It will be hyperianism. It will be ontological mathematics.
I just think that the same is true, remains true today. That we have all sorts of truths that want to undermine religious faith, but God is not yet dead, as we can see with billions of people across the planet. I think we'll still be quoting Nietzsche's parable for many, many decades to come.
She literally has nothing else to fall back on except for like experience. I think she's kind of a little ill-equipped to talk about something that's more abstract. Like, I'm kind of a little confused as why they brought her on just because she's got like a historical context. I mean, I guess, I don't know. It's so weird watching philosophical debates sometimes because, like, people just, like, nobody ever brings, like, the Hyperion, like, component to it. So it's just very frustrating. Like, we know this, we know that. Like, I want there to be, like, more progressive conversation.
Another hypothesis that often intrigued me. Why do we always associate religion with being maybe happy, yes, but being good? I think a colleague of mine, okay, Slovenia is, as President Trump would have put it, a shithole of a country, small, but sociologists made here something that the Catholic Church was horrified at. He, on a quite representative sample, he tried to compare however it was able to be measured, family violence and so on, the religious nature belief of people with the ethical standards they pursued in their lives. And his conclusion was unanimous. On average, atheists are better morally than religious people. I'm not saying now, I define myself also, some of you may know, as Christian atheist and so on, but you know, if there is a lesson, especially from the past and so on, is that gods in the sense of what motivates us when we refer to religion can also be evil in the sense of justifying.
Yes, they're trying to talk about like the positive components of like religion, and he's bringing forth like the parts that are evil. That's what I'm getting so far.
Even imposing evil acts and so on. Who is the cosmologist who wrote a book called, not Weinberg, who wrote The Three First Seconds? I think he said something wonderful. You will be shocked. He said, without religion, good people would be good and bad people would be bad. But you need something like religion to make basically good people do bad, horrible things. I'm not saying this is the ultimate truth of religion, but there also is an aspect of this. First, when we talk about meditation, Buddhism, and so on, please don't forget that Buddha, the original guy, was, if not an atheist, at least an agnostic. He explicitly says, God, blah, blah, it doesn't concern me. And so on. Secondly, just very quickly,
I mean, I know what he's saying, but like,
my
there's
last
nothing to
point,
interject
when we
right
talk
now.
about, yes, effectiveness of religion and all that, but nonetheless, you know, I agree with you. It cannot explain everything, science, and incidentally, good scientists usually know this. You already indicated a key difference between true science and scientism. And I don't know if you agree or not, but I would have put somebody like Dawkins more on the side of
Oh, what? The guns right
scientism. Like I spoke with many very serious cognitivists who told me he's more, as they put it in Nazi Germany, propaganda Abteilung, you know, for science. He's not doing the real thing. But nonetheless, look, my God, modern science did terribly important things. So
Well, yes. Oh, I gotta say, like, this comes up often. Is like, why does hyperianism like piss on science so much? Hyperianism loves science. We love science. We love science about like nature and like medical science and stuff like that. Like tons of stuff. Everything that explains like how the holos operates, how reality operates, but not what it actually is. There's a big difference. Like ultimately reality is mathematical. But I mean, we need natural science. We need science that understands like what plants need to grow and thrive. We need science to examine the animal species and the balance of animal species and plants that provide healthy environments for the earth for to sustain humanity, things like that. We need to understand science that understands how our avatar works and how to keep them, increase the longevity of them and the health capacity of them. Like, we need all of that. We need science. We love science. But when science tries to explain what reality is and just the meaning of reality, or the meaning of purpose, the meaning of purpose, the meaning of purpose, humanity's purpose and all of that, it really falls short. It falls short. It cannot explain everything. It really cannot. It's too materialistic. Unless we're talking about, unless there's like a specific like ontological science or something that says like, look here, because it's so interesting. Like if you look at the like original meaning of science, which is like original meaning of science, it's like the study of nature or something, the nature of reality. It's something to the effect of the nature of philosophy, or the philosophy of nature, or something. Somebody, like, you know what I mean. But anyways,
nonetheless want to oppose to this new postmodern historicist way of, science is just another discourse. It has a notion of truth which is limited to it, and so on and so on.
Okay, Rupert, before you respond, I'd like you to bridge us into our next theme as well. So, will the next generation
save
be
us,
more
Rupert.
or less religious than ourselves? Just because we're running out of time.
We got 10 minutes left, folks.
I think religions ultimately are based on direct experience, what you could call mystical experiences. Many people have them spontaneously in nature. Some people have them through near-death experiences. Some people have them through psychedelic experiences. Some people have them as a result of the deliberate practice of spiritual practices like meditation
Yes.
or prayer or fasting or other practices. There are many spiritual practices. And this sense of the connection of our consciousness with a vastly greater consciousness is not
Sorry, but look, he's got a loppy right there in the back. He's got a loppy, the unicorn. Anyways, ha!
a
Sorry
theory
for the Pee Wee Herman laugh. Sorry.
people who've had this experience. It's an experience. I've had such experiences myself. I'm a practicing Christian. And one reason I am is that I've
fancy
actually
that,
had
but,
direct experiences that make the idea of a consciousness beyond our own not just a theory, a proposition in theology, but an actual experience I've had, which for me was very convincing. Now, I know that atheists and materialists will say, well, this is just the release of dopamine in the brain or something like that, or short-circuiting various bits of the brain, and that it's all inside the head. But the fact is, when you have these experiences, you're working on the basis of experience. I mean, science is supposed to be empirical, which means experience.
He says,
This is experience. And to oppose it, you don't oppose it with materialist science, with experience, you oppose it with ideology. The ideology that mind is nothing but the brain. Now,
no! What? You led us astray, Rupert. You led us astray. Why, Rupert? Why? I have to rewind.
this is not a theory for people who've had this experience, it's an experience. I've had such experiences myself. I'm a practicing Christian. And one reason
He's a practicing Christian, and he's had Christian experiences.
I am is that I've actually had direct experiences that make the idea of a consciousness beyond our own not just a theory, a proposition in theology.
But here he's backing up the idea that consciousness
But an actual experience.
is beyond the body. So there we can agree. Yes, your mind is beyond the body, but he says some things that are very interesting here.
Experience I've had, which for me was very convincing. Now, I know that atheists and materialists will say, well, this is just the release of dopamine in the brain or something like that, or short-circuiting various bits of the brain, and that it's all inside the head. But the fact is, when you have these experiences, you're working on the basis of experience. I mean, science.
It's like he's acknowledging that there's an aspect of religion that helps you understand that you are beyond your brain, but then also associates religious experiences in general as something, as a factual, empirical thing. Which doesn't make sense to me as a Hyperion, because as a Hyperion, any spiritual experience, yes, it is a product of your brain. It's a hallucination. Experiences are subjective. They're not objective reality. In an objective reality, you are a consciousness beyond like what you understand it to be, but It's so weird. It's like there's like these weird things trying to be connected to other things and they really don't relate. This is getting really muddy.
Is supposed to be empirical, which means experience. This is experience. And to oppose it, you don't oppose it with materialist science,
Did somebody laugh? I swear I heard somebody laugh. I swear.
with a vastly greater consciousness. Is not a theory for people who've had this experience, it's an experience. I've had such experiences myself. I'm a practicing Christian.
Listen so closely. Listen
and
close.
one reason I am is that I've actually had direct experiences that make the idea of a consciousness beyond our own not just a theory, a proposition in theology, but an actual experience I've had, which for me was very convincing. Now, I know that atheists and materialists will say, well, this is just the release of dopamine in the brain or something like that, or short-circuiting various bits of the brain, and that it's all inside the head. But the fact is, when you have these experiences, you're working on the basis of experience. I mean, science is supposed to be empirical, which means experience. This is experience. And to oppose it, you don't oppose it with
Did you hear that laugh?
materialist science with experience, you oppose it with ideology. The ideology that mind is nothing but the brain. Now, I think that the limitations of that ideology are very clear to anyone who's had mystical experiences. And increasing numbers of people are having them, partly because of the spread of psychedelics, which for many people are a kind of rite of passage into a larger view of consciousness. They certainly were for me when I first...
There's not a lot of discussion in how we go about these experiences. There's not a lot of like rules and regulation around how we speak about these experiences, and I don't like that, but anyways, I want to finish
psychedelics in 1971 or something like that. Before that, I was an atheist, a standard materialist atheist. It went with my scientific education. And they helped open my mind to new possibilities. And I later took up meditation and yoga because I wanted to explore the realm of consciousness without drugs. I mean, not against drugs, but I'm not saying they're necessary, but for many people, they're an opening.
I can agree with them on that on a personal level. I'm not one to experiment with drugs. I like to explore consciousness in other ways, but I'm not against it per se. I know it's an opener, a door opener for many people.
An opening to this realm of experience. Given that human beings have had these experiences over millennia, given that they underlie the enlightenment of the Buddha, it was a direct experience. Jesus' experience of his own closeness to God was not as a result of doing a PhD or going to a rabbinical seminary. It was a direct experience. And these kinds of experiences are not going to go away. And for those who've had them, they're extremely meaningful. They're more meaningful than reading books on popular science or people trying to explain away near-death experience.
The reason why this is frustrating to me is because this is just like a really... I just feel constipated. Like I want to poo and get that relief. But it's like intellectually, because it's just this religion versus science thing. And I'm just like over here like a Hyperion, like, but there's a third path. I just need that release, and I'm not getting it through this conversation. So it's like this false dichotomy of just, you either go with religion or you go with science. And there's no popular like bridge between the two.
Experiences in terms of anoxia in the brain and that kind of thing. And I think that they're likely, therefore, to lead to a persistent interest in spiritual practices, and that these spiritual practices are likely to lead to a resurgence of connection with religious traditions, because if they're just free-floating, they're not rooted in a tradition and they're not rooted in a community. And religions provide many things for people, but they provide a sense of interconnection in community with other people in a way that fragmented individualism doesn't. So my own view is that it's very likely that religions will evolve, as Jennifer put. It was wonderful the way she described this evolutionary process. I think they'll continue to evolve. They are evolving before our very eyes at the moment, and that many people will find them of value. So that's my answer to the third question.
Sounds like Rupert was saying part of the enduring popularity of religion is due to the fact that we need something more, not to be fragmented individuals. And the question is, does that thing need to be religion? Are there other practices, other forms of life that could do that? Or is there something specifically about religion that only religion can meet that need? And then the question is, what counts as religion? So sorry to introduce a lot of questions there, but maybe that'll help fuel the remaining part of this debate before we get to the Q&A.
I think what I would say is I definitely heard in Rupert, and I'm pretty sure I heard in Slavoj say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but something to the extent that the longing for or the drive towards religious experience is from their view something that is deeply human. And
look, I'll tell you this. As much as Hyperians, we tell you, you really must understand the mathematics of how this works. You really must look at that before anything else. You really must understand that this world is not physical. This reality is not stagnant. This is not objectively what's real. That this is like a shared dream. And we are eternal consciousness is occupying avatars, physical bodies. But there's so much about these physical bodies that we're experiencing that the avatar perspective, that is really important. It's really vital. It's really essential. And you have to think about in terms of you're not going to be perfectly in your monadic perspective and your absolute perspective all the time. You're just not. You're never going to be perfectly motivated that way. You're always going to be back in your avatar perspective. And through the avatar perspective, I think it's important to default to the sort of feeling type mythos religious mindset and go with that rather than constantly fight with that and be completely utterly ruthless to yourself and treat yourself like you're an idiot. Why would you be mean to yourself like that? Go with it. If you're in that space where you're in avatar mode and that's all you can see at the moment for whatever reason, for whatever experiencing you're having in your life, and you have that urge to have something to call to you, to call you out of whatever funk you're in, on a spiritual level, you can do that through a very rational and psychological way, through some sort of religious practice, if you will. And sure, whatever. Sure, what if it's Christian? It's a Christian practice. That's fine, whatever. But there can be a rational basis to it. Religion needs to evolve. Religion needs to reframe its basics and its foundation to represent something that's more psychologically productive. So, yeah.
I would just say, unfortunately, in this regard, this debate's going to be very boring because I will not disagree with them. That's the point that I would make, and it's called many, many different things.
Yeah, I think that there's always, even as monads, even all of us Hyperion creators and stuff, content creators, we understand that every day, we are just, monads, which is where I feel the kind of meaning behind Monday Monad is kind of going for me. It's weird how that's kind of evolved itself, and it's rather appropriate. When I think of the term Monday Monad now, I don't necessarily think things have to be released on Monday. I think of the average worker, blue collar worker or whatever, just average American or whatever. It's just the Monday, do you ever get a case of the Mondays? The Monday monad, the average monad, the average Joe Schmo. You live a daily life, day to day. You're never going to perfectly be in this brilliant monadic, totally perfect a Abraxian perspective all the time. You're always going to like get stuck like feeling like you're just sucking in your avatar perspective. And honestly, like you should go to the Hyperion source. And Hyperion source, please, somebody from the Hyperion source, please plug your last Monday's live stream right now, because that would be like really great. But yeah. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, that's what I feel like the meaning of Monday Monad is. It's like the everyday monad. Here's what you do in your everyday life. Yeah, you're going to have an everyday life. And that's where a sort of spiritual practice, I think that a sort of mythological practice as a Hyperion will be important for you. Something to just like help you focus and keep reminding yourself that the monadic and the Abraxian perspective is there, but also just like being able to carry out and function in your everyday life.
Jung called it the religious instinct. Viktor Frankl called it, man's search for meaning. Ralph Waldo Emerson called it beautiful necessity. We could go on and on. But this craving for something that I do think is peculiar to something that we might call religion, and it goes beyond theology, it goes beyond epistemology or truth claims. And this is to pick up on Rupert. It goes beyond institutions. It goes to the question of certain kinds of experiences, feelings, environments, mystical experiences, a sense of wonder and awe. And I think that this is something that we see time and time again. That no matter how much materialism wants to explain it away, or at least it does explain it, but that it's there. What form will that take? We'll have to see. I think
hate this
what we
only
do
choice
know
between
about
religion
this
and
next
science,
generation is
especially
that many, at least the
science.
educated
So
ones, are
dirty.
keenly aware of living in something that we call the Anthropocene. They also know
Feel
that they've
nasty.
inherited from their parents and their
Like I need to
grandparents,
wash the
that
dirt
they're living
off
on
me.
borrowed time. And so I think all of these questions are going to take a particular kind of urgency now for the next generation. And I don't think either something we call science or religion is going to be enough for them to, as Nietzsche put it, shoot arrows of longing.
Which makes an interesting like point for me, like, or at least like for me to think about, like, why is it that something crazy and religious is more comfortable for me to accept than something completely dead and materialistic? I don't know. I think it's because at least if there's a crazy religious aspect, at least still embodies some sort of eternal future, I guess. Whereas something that's like scientifically materialistic and like super like atheist, it's like, well, things just stop. And it's like, okay. And it's like, well, you won't care because you'll just not be there. And it's like, okay, that doesn't help me now, does it?
Over this abyss. I think they're going to borrow from both. But I think that yearning, that longing, that something that Jung calls a religious instinct is something that is absolutely deeply human, and it may take different forms, but I don't think it's going to go away. And that's Slavoj. I hand it over to you now.
Okay, but you can take it from me when you want. Okay. Very briefly, first, my reply to that idea that religions are based on an extra intense, deep, no irony intended here, direct experience. But correct me if I'm wrong. I read some texts by, as already mentioned it, I think by so-called neurotheologists who claim that, and I read then theologists' responses to them. Neurotheologists claim that by doing, don't ask me what, certain things to your brain,
I know where he's going with this. I swear it was him who was laughing when Rupert was talking about like there being direct like I had religious experiences and they were direct experiences, and science is empirical and this is like based on senses and the feelings, right? Like we kind of, as Hyperions, were like, yes, and go on. So like I feel like it, like he's totally being like Zizek is totally calling him out, like right here, like saying that they're like, yes, religious experiences are based on the senses, on the brain. If you do certain things to elicit these kind of chemicals in your brain, which you can literally put yourself into a psychological trance, into a religious trance. It happens all the time. As a Mormon, when I grew up in Mormonism, there was the church, there was the holy Mormon temples in which you would go in, and the whole aesthetic of the temple and the demeanor and the behavior that was expected of you literally elicited and produced a sort of psychological effect within you to where you would have certain spiritual experiences. I've talked about this. Oh, what video? Actually, I made a direct video about this. Let me look and see which one it was. It was something about how religious experiences are just dangerous or something. I was trying to be really on point with that. Let's see. No, it was really good. Let's see. Yes. So here's my exact video on this topic is called spiritual experiences, humanity's most dangerous drug, because you can literally do stuff to put your brain in this weird hypnotic state to where you can have a spiritual experience. You can evoke a spiritual experience. That's why it's so weird to associate it with something as empirical, even, because you can, it's so weird how you can just induce it. Let me grab the link. Here's the link. You guys should check out that video. But I talk about that exactly, just like that, about how you can do certain things to yourself to have a spiritual experience. Anyways,
they can trigger something that you experience precisely as this intense religious experience. And it's interesting what is the theologist's answer to them, because here this seems like a good proof, nothing to do with your inner life. I do it to you in a certain way, and you will have that type of experience. But all the experiences that you, and I loved your presentations, Rupert, that you mentioned, Buddha's enlightenment, where I'm sorry, Buddha's enlightenment for original Buddhism itself was not in any sense a religious experience. It was simply an experience of true nature, of reality, of the ultimate void, and so on and so on. Christian experience. My God, I'm fascinated by it, but for me, and I agree here with ultra theologists like my beloved 20th century Gilbert Keith Chesterton, Christ's basic experience is that, Father, Father, why have you abandoned me? Which is precisely an incredible, intense experience of the separation from God, which is the way I see it unique. I can argue about this later, unique for Christianity. So I would nonetheless...
Also, lots of, I feel like I read somewhere where lots of people looked into it, the way, Jesus was describing that experience, it was, kind of not the crucifixion itself, but, it was sort of moment of him praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. It sounded like some sort of diabetic episode or some shit like that. Seriously.
Go a little bit further in this direction that our religious experience, no matter how intensely personal it's historically formed. I can go on, for example, how do you call it, John of the Cross and Teresa Avila, the two big medieval mystics. They are describing a very different experience. So I would go more in this direction. And just to finish, yes, the limit of science is a certain abyss, this experience of even what I called incompleteness of reality. But you see, my point is not then materials come and accounts for it. I think that this shattering experience of, let's call it primordial void, what Buddha experienced, This is for me the zero level of materialism. This, you want materialism, don't look to mechanistic scientists, look to Buddha.
Hey, thank you, Slavoj. Thanks to all of you. Thanks, Rupert. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Thank you. I see Jordan Peterson being mentioned in the comments. Please, can we not? I would love to. No, okay, but I am so super tempted to bring up Jordan Peterson's material on like dreams and dream interpretation and shit like that, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of gold there. So maybe we'll do that next week. If you want to talk about dream interpretation and we'll look at a little bit of what Jordan Peterson is saying about that, I can almost guarantee you that you will be very entertained and very intrigued. But yes, okay, so essentially, is there a future to religion in a rational future? Yes. I don't think religious practice, keyword practice, not religious belief will die. And religion will have to evolve to mostly a rational psychological practice. Even something as like Christianity, or as our Robert friend earlier came in and tried to say, Catholicism, anything you want to pick, any sort of mythology, any sort of religious background, anything you can take and adapt to a more rational psychological way. That's not the problem. The problem is the religious belief, the belief in the religion, the deities, the creators, the things like that, being actual things, it being literal. We can't live like that. There is something above and beyond the way we are conscious now as humans. Like, obviously, there's something more to consciousness. We are eternal minds. But science can't explain that. It can't. And as awesome as this discussion was, like watching these people talk about this, it was amazing. Don't get me wrong. It was also equally super frustrating because it's this just weird dichotomy between the science and the religion. And this is where hyperianism is waving its arms like, hello, like we have stuff to fill in here. And one of these days I would love to watch this kind of discussion with like a super well credentialed Hyperion on the stand. Until then, sorry. Until then, we will prevail eventually. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming to tonight's discussion. Thank you so much to our moderators for helping keep our chat live and healthy. And why don't we turn our music back on as we like get on to the closing? So, oh, sorry, clicked the wrong one. So, anyways, but so next week I think we might actually look into Jordan Peterson and the way we like credentialed. I don't know. Is that a word? It is now. A credentialed Hyperion. But anyways, because I mean, what are we gonna do? Be like, and YouTuber Jan Erickson on the stand, like. YouTuber, I guess. I don't know. I'm not credentialed. I just like to think. Think rationally. And so does Hyperianism, and that's why I align with Hyperianism anyways. Please like the live stream. Please share the live stream. Please watch the material, and perhaps make comments in the replays. Help me timestamp the live stream. I'm gonna start timestamping it. I know I should. I really have no business not to. Kai, I need to see your credentials. Credentials. We all need credentials, okay? I don't know. A PhD, what do you want? I can't even... for those of you who are pursuing college degrees, I think you're amazing. But for me personally, I don't think that's like in my future. So I'm like, to hell with it. But if people like that and want that, like, I don't think it's wrong or bad. It's just like, if you want that, get it. I just have no motivation myself. So like, I will not be having any credentials other than being a YouTuber. Anyway, so please like the video. Please share the live stream still. Please help me timestamp things, leave comments. Please watch the replay. And enjoy your weekend. Yes, I will be posting a video on Monday, and then again next Friday. I'm thinking we will talk a little bit about Jordan Peterson and have a little fun, a little giggle, and a little gag. I don't know what I meant by that. Anyways. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much, moderators, for coming. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, John. Thank you, Van Winter. Thank you, Imaginista. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, let's see. Who am I missing? I don't know. Good night, everybody. I need a cake and a steak. Or just some, I got ice. Oh, I got red velvet ice cream in the freezer. Oh, that's totally my night. That's my night. And I think I mentioned Isley Brothers earlier. A little listen to Isley Brothers and eating ice cream. That sounds like a good night. Disco and ice cream. What else do I have to eat? Potato chips. Always potato chips. Potato chips. And ice cream. Have a good weekend, everybody. Have a good night. Take care, and God bless. No, just joking. Ad Astra, everyone. Goodbye. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Goodbye.